streaming online on YouTube and I believe on Instagram as well. This is Camden Busey. I'm in Libertyville, Illinois, and this is our third week in a row doing a Friday afternoon live stream, something of a happy hour, RF Live, I don't know, digital cloister of information, whatever this is. We're looking forward to having a great conversation. And this is the first time we've had a live stream in this sequence with other people. I've done the last two flying solo, but today we've got quite a panel. We got some people that might be popping in to talk about a variety of things even later. So look forward to that. But I do want to go around the horn and introduce everyone and get started. And not everyone's going to be able to stay with us the entire time, but doing it Brady Bunch style, we'll go top left to clockwise. From my perspective, I want to welcome to the live stream. We have Pat Daly, who serves as a vice president. I don't know what you're vice president of, but he's at Greenville Presbyterian Theological Seminary. Used to be a Banner of Truth. Still very much appreciative of the work there. But welcome, Pat. It's good to see you today. How are you doing?
It's good to be with you. This is my first live session.
Live thing. Well, we don't know what we're doing.
I'm reaching a life goal, Brady Bunch.
Did you manifest this with your visualizations?
I can't tell you that.
You're going to lose a lot of donations if you start talking like that. Oh, boy.
Oh, we appreciate that. We also have an alum of Greenville and also a pastor of Westminster PCA down in Jacksonville, Florida, Stephen Spinnenweber. People know Stephen from his appearances, no doubt, on Presbycast and other places, and his many impersonations and the mustache. Welcome, Stephen. It's good to see you today.
Thanks, Camden. Long-time listener, first-time caller. The obligatory, first time.
You got to say the thing.
You have to say the thing.
Yeah. Well, Stephen's going to join us today. He's talking about a handful of things. We're going to probably get to talking about preaching through numbers, some commentaries that have proven helpful to Stephen, as well as foreshadow a forthcoming book, Loving the Law of God in the Life of the Believer by Stephen Spinnenweber, and it's with Christian Focus, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
and the release date is May 13th this year.
Coming up. So we'll just give it a little appetite, a little teaser, and whet the appetite on that. And of course, as people see and maybe have already heard, we have with us Ryan Noah, Director of Education and Advancement here at Reformed Forum. Doesn't always like being on the program, but I love it when he's on. Yeah. But he likes to stay in the back. He's here in the office, but not in the studio, if that makes sense. So he's in his own little office there for technical reasons. Temporarily, we're separated. Not because of COVID or anything, just for
no. Yeah,
just for the live stream. Yeah, good to have you. It's been a busy time. We've got a lot of events coming up. Ryan and I have been hard at work hitting the phone lines, calling people and telling people about some upcoming events that we have. We're going to talk about that soon. But while we have Pat with us, we want to certainly talk about and promote and mention Greenville's forthcoming conference. The Pastor, His Call, Character, and Work. It's going to be held March 11th through 13th, 2025. It's not just any old conference, but the confessional conference. I've been going to the Greenville conference now, and the annual conference for, I think, 5 or 6 years, and really appreciated it. Love seeing it grow. Looking forward to being back this year. And Pat, we wanted to have you on to talk about the conference and what you're featuring and maybe what some of your goals or objectives are, and see if we can get more people out to South Carolina in March.
Yeah, we'd like that. Yeah, thanks, Camden. Appreciate that. So the confessional conference theme this year is the pastor, his call, character, and work. So we'll be studying just what the Bible teaches about what a pastor is, what he isn't, what he should be spending his time on, the kind of man a pastor should be. So obviously as a seminary here at Greenville, that's something that's really near and dear to our heart. So it fit really well for us on the theme. It's actually, we stole the theme from Banner of Truth. They came out with a 1-volume collection of articles by Old Princeton that Jim Garrettson had originally come out in a 2-volume Princeton and the Work of Christian Ministry. Then I believe it was Sinclair Ferguson kind of read through that 2-volume work and wanted to make them more accessible to pastors, because there's just so many gems in the past, especially from Princeton, on pastoral ministry. So they came up with this title, The Pastor's Call, Character, and Work. And as we were thinking about a theme, we couldn't think of a better title or a better theme. And so like many good ministries, we're just ripping off the banner of truth. Christian Focus was mentioned, so there's another one of them. If Willie's listening somewhere, RHB certainly done a lot of that. But so the conference is in March. We're looking forward to that. We actually, speaking of Banner of Truth, we're going to have a Banner of Truth pre-conference.
I was going to say, yeah.
The first day of the conference from 9 to noon, we'll have some Banner of Truth trustees looking at sketches from church history, some pastoral profiles here on the campus of Greenville. And then Tuesday afternoon that week, we head over to a church locally here where we host the conference. So if you're new to the conference, there's about 400 to 600 people, varies from year to year. It's a family conference. Don't let the theme confuse you. It's not just for ministers, although certainly there will be many ministers, friends, alumni of the seminary, friends locally. It's not just a seminary for people who've gone to Greenville. We're coming together to study confessional biblical theology. And so we have many friends, like our friends here from Reformed Forum, who didn't go to Greenville, maybe wish they went to Greenville, maybe have an honorary Greenville Seminary degree. But
oh, please, yes,
Ryan, I know we've been talking about that.
I should have worn my bow tie.
Yeah,
but go ahead. I don't want to stop your roll.
So
yeah,
it's a conference for everybody.
Yes,
we actually this year are going to have a family track too. So a lot of families come. We try to make it as affordable as possible. We do all the meals together, so it's really convenient and easy. There's some Chick-fil-A featured, which always makes the kids and dads happy.
Oh, sure.
And
I even saw Duck Donuts last year.
Duck Donuts. We as R.C. Sproul said, we exist to, use money well, and so we want to invest money well, and so Duck Donuts is how we do it.
Oh, it's spectacular.
Yeah. So there's a family track. So I think half of the addresses, your kids can go into another track where there's actually some Greenville students who are doing catechism, teaching, games. It's really fun. So it just makes it easy for families.
Mm-hmm.
March 11th, 13th, you'll recognize a lot of the men that will be speaking there, especially if you're an avid listener to Reform Forum. Men like Carlton Wynne, who I believe might be popping on.
Yeah, it might be popping in a few minutes. Mm-hmm.
Craig Troxel, Jeff Stuyvesant, some professors from the seminary here. So Ian Hamilton, Ryan McGraw, Jonathan Master, David Gilbert. And then there really is quite a few speakers, actually. I don't know how we fit it all in. But then John Tweeddale and Terry Johnson will also be coming. So it should be a good group of men.
Oh, wow.
Check us out online, gpts.edu. And yeah, that's a little summary of what we do.
It's such a unique conference. Not only do the families come, but it feels in many ways to me as a frequent attender, but not an alum, as a homecoming of sorts. But it's amazing how many people feel the same way and continue to come back, but yet they also didn't go to Greenville. Maybe they didn't even have a pastor that went to Greenville, but they still have found a community in the seminary, and it's unique. We go to a lot of events, even in our space. I mean, Pat and I joke sometimes that we're conference buddies, and Pat, with his previous work, went to perhaps even more conferences. But there's nothing quite like the Greenville conference in that regard. I haven't noticed, and I don't know if it could exactly be replicated. I've been talking to all my friends at Mid-America, because I serve on the board there, say we got to have an event like what they're doing, but you've got some magic, whatever, in a, non-pagan sense, but you have a very special, unique thing that you've captured, and it's really grown and cultivated in a wonderful way.
That's very kind of you. I think it's trying to be accessible to everybody, but it's like deep, experimental, historic Christianity. So when you have preaching and lectures to that end, I think that it always makes it special. Really good singing. You usually have Christians who love singing hymns and psalms. So I do think the singing aspect of the conference is really edifying. But the Lord's been kind. So yeah, we'd love to see more people.
Psalm 98 to Lingham. I mean, the chills go down your spine when everybody's singing parts. That's worth the price of admission alone.
That's right.
Well, look, before you leave, Pat, let's talk to Carlton real quick. Welcome, Carlton. It's good to see you.
Hey, brother. Hey, guys.
Carlton Wynne, everyone will know, is at Westminster PCA in Atlanta, Georgia. So we got two Westminster PCAs represented here, Jacksonville and Atlanta. So we got
the Twin Towers.
Falcons, Jaguars action going on in the backroom channels. Carlton, we were just talking to Pat about the Greenville conference and
Nice.
promoting that. And we know you're going to be a speaker there. I know you just jumped in and we're putting you right on the spot, but how are things going preparing for that? Do you have anything interesting up your sleeve? Any props or anything that you're planning to bring to the conference?
I don't have any props or gimmicks. I pulled up the GPTS website right before logging on because I thought you might ask me about it. But then when I saw Pat on my screen, I was like,
now you feel you're free. So all the details have been taken care of. So you're just free to talk about whatever you're
everything's covered. So my topic, did you guys get into topics?
Not entirely, no.
No, just the speakers.
Okay. For what it's worth, my topic is the act of God in calling a man to pastoral ministry.
Mm.
How do we unpack that? What exactly transpires in that event? So I'm realizing that there's a lot of stuff related to the call of a minister that I've got to not address. The scope of the call, the meaning of the call, I'm really trying to zero in on what is happening when God calls a man to the ministry. How does the sovereign operation of God the Father working through the Spirit for the sake of the Son interface with the man's desires and the role of the church and all the rest? And I think my nutshell thesis is going to be that the call of a man to the ministry, I'm curious to know y'all's thoughts on this, head me off if this is wrong, is a unique application of the virtue of the death and resurrection of Christ. So there are some parallels with the effectual call into union with Christ, but there are differences as well. But the common thread is in both the effectual call and the call to the ministry, there's a unique application of the death and resurrection of Christ to a man.
You
Thoughts
think
on that idea?
It's interesting. I was wondering, as you mentioned that, if you think that I haven't thought of it that way before exactly. Do you think there's some sort of analog also for, if we compare the Ordo Salutis to the general priesthood of all believers, is there some sort of general analog that maybe parallels or the specific call to ministry, to ordained ministry, is somehow a more heightened or narrow version of that? I don't know. I'm wondering how you think. You mentioned the effectual calling, but I'm wondering if there's some sort of parallel that's nascent to the Ordo Salutis or something of that akin. Something of that sort.
I wouldn't want to put them into a hierarchy.
Yeah.
There's just a unique application of how a man is to die and to live in Christ with respect to formal pastoral ministry.
Sure.
That I think can shed indirect light on the call of the Christian in general. So
to put off the old self and put on the new, and
Pat probably
Philippians 2, live for the sake of others, But
I think they've designed this conference to be of use to, people beyond pastoral ministry. And so I'm hoping that this approach is not only true to the scriptures, but useful for non-pastors as well, as they feel the indirect light of what I'm saying on just the Christian life in general.
I love it. That's great. Appreciate the focus.
Carlton, I don't know if you're thinking through some of the applications of what you've just said, but are you planning at all to interact with? I feel like it's a pretty big misconception in the church that people think of pastors as having a job, and the difference between a call. Certainly, there's aspects of a pastor's call that is a job, and he has a salary, and he has responsibilities, and he has actions he has to carry out. But there's a difference between being employed and being called, and implications for how you view your work, implications for even calls to other works. Have you thought about how to kind of engage with that?
Well, I don't know the topics of the other speakers, but I have in my notes. I just pulled up my notes, and I was trying to zero in on what exactly am I being asked to talk about. And the description is, the aim of the address is to explain biblically the notion of a calling to the pastorate. Not so much about the ongoing calling that pastors have, but rather the initial ways in which God works internally and externally to set a man apart for gospel ministry. So I wrote on my notes, these are my words, I'm not going to address directly the purpose of the call, like what we're called to, nor the dynamic of the call itself, nor the scope of the call, like what is all involved as the whole person to the whole service. But I'm really zeroing on the act of the call itself. So, Pat, I hope somebody addresses what you're saying, but I'm not sure that I'm, it's possible that I can touch on it, but
well, I think your notes are good, and I think one of the issues with the conference where you have someone speaking on the work, someone speaking on the call, someone speaking on the character. Whenever you have a strong theme, you can have guys there's so much overlapping that Venn diagram where you hear the same sermon 4 times. So I think you're on the right track. I was just curious because that is something I run into all the time.
Sure.
There's someone who sits in the pew talking with other Christians about our pastor, the language of his job.
Yeah.
I've always wondered about on church websites when they call it like staff instead of like officers, and like even the language is like, oh, little slide,
Yeah, that's interesting.
Just using our language carefully.
Unless it's Moses' staff, then that's something.
Well, that's biblical. I can get behind that.
How much is this book going to be featured at the? Is the conference kind of like unofficially built around this book?
That's basically what I said before you came on.
Okay.
It's plagiaristically based around that book, yes.
Okay.
And Pat's going to get
cannot
sued
copyright
into
a title.
oblivion.
Listen,
I would.
You can't copyright a title. That's
If
against
Greenville
the.
doesn't survive, and by the way, I love the new nomenclature for the conference. Like Greenville just became confessional. It was always the Greenville Theology Conference. Results would vary, but now it's the Confessional Conference.
Yeah,
so
it's not theological anymore.
we're starting with the man in the mirror, Stephen. We're trying to make a change.
Good.
Why do you think we have a banner?
Now that's in my head.
We have a pre-conference because I got into copyright issues, and I said, "Look, Banner, if we let you do a pre-conference, can we use the title?" No,
Yeah,
that isn't how it happened, but
It's a fair trade. It works.
they're the best ministry to copy. I mean, what else can I say?
We appreciate Banner. Thank you to Greenville as well, as we were able to do a little bit of a less formal, but nevertheless useful and impactful pre-conference ourselves last year. We're turning that into a book that I'm finishing up typesetting. Hopefully in the next month, we'll have that out. Ordinary Means, Extraordinary Ends, Word, Sacrament, and the Great Commission. Carlton has a chapter in there that he delivered at our theology conference back in the end of September. So I'm excited about that. Pat, thanks for joining. You're free and welcome to hang on. But I know if you got to get moving, you're free to go as well. It's always a pleasure to speak with you.
It's great to be with you guys. I've definitely reached my limit of helpfulness.
Okay, brother.
I'll let you guys take it on from here.
We'll have you back sometime if we didn't
Yeah.
scare you off.
Might
All
see
right.
you soon. Take
Thanks,
care.
Pat. Ryan, I wanted to take a minute for us to speak about some of our upcoming events while we're on the subject of events, and then we can transition to talk to Stephen about some of the work that he's been focusing on in the book of Numbers, and maybe get into Loving the Law as well, the preview of his forthcoming book that's coming out in May. But Ryan, we've been on the phone. Just maybe why don't you give people a picture of what the office has been like for the last couple of days? I think people would like a little look behind the curtain.
Oh, well, we've just been burning up the phone lines, Camden, and we have one of our other, staff, Hannah Dugan, doing the same. We've been reaching out to friends and supporters in a whole wide range of capacities, especially those that are going to be in Oklahoma, who live in Oklahoma, who are in neighboring states, or who might be inclined to travel from anywhere in the United States to be at our free seminar on February 21st and 22nd at the Lively Hotel in downtown Oklahoma City. We are tremendously grateful to a particular donor who's underwritten the event so that we can offer free registration, but the space is limited. Lord willing, we're going to be able to host 72 people. Sounds like that's going to be the cap. It'll be a 2-day event, Friday evening. We're going to have a nice reception with some hors d'oeuvres and drinks. And then Camden, you're going to have a live Christ the Center recorded discussion on the topic of
we're having
Revelation
Marcus Minninger is going to be our special guest,
Oh,
and
yes.
Jim Cassidy and Lane Tipton and I will be speaking with Marcus about redemptive historical interpretation. But we're going to be not just speaking about that in general, but we're going to look at Romans 1-3 and Hebrews 6 at least as two test cases, really kind of asking the question, what difference does redemptive historical hermeneutic make? What difference, and how does that shed further light on passages that have either been misunderstood or poorly understood in the past? So Marcus has written a really excellent dissertation on Romans 1-3, looking at the theme of the revelation of God's wrath there, that was published with Moore Seebeck. And then he's also written a book on really a redemptive historical interpretation of Hebrews that's forthcoming in the IVP series, the Silver series. So on the New Studies in Biblical Theology, I think is the title of that series. And Marcus is a good friend, teaches New Testament down at Mid-America Reformed Seminary, graduate of Westminster, and former security guard where I used to work. So we go way back when Carlton was poking around Westminster as well, even before Carlton Marcus precedes us both at Westminster. But we're looking forward to talking to him. So people are welcome. The event's free. And thanks to the support of a very kind and generous donor, that the registration's free, but the space is limited. So you can head to reformedforum.org for further information. And if you can get there, you can come to the event for free, but we also have a block of rooms that are reserved for a special rate. So if you'd like to get yourself a room, that's on you, but we'd love to have you there with us. But if you register, we'll have you on Friday evening and on Saturday morning as well, all in the same room, and we'll be providing breakfast on Saturday. So it's going to be a great opportunity. We look forward to the event. Hopefully it'll go well, and if it goes really well, this might be something we can replicate and take on the road to other cities.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm really excited about it. I think it's really special that Dr. Minninger, Marcus, is going to be joining us too. I remember fond memories of being with Dan Ragusa, who many will know if you listen to Reform Forum, and Dr. Minninger's class. And he had first been thinking about Hebrews chapter 6, verses 1-4 in particular. And, now to see, it's, I don't know, 7 or 8 years later, the fruits of his robust engagement with this passage are finally going to come to more fulsome light in a new book from IVP in that classic series. I'm really excited about it, and it's a privilege to have him open up Romans 2. It was Romans as well, not particularly chapter 2, but I was telling you, Camden, that he should get into his Romans 7 material as well. And if we just said, like, who is the man of Romans 7, that we flood the registrations, and it'd be a good discussion.
Definitely have thoughts on that myself.
I know you do. Yeah, I know. I've almost been convinced, a few times, but I'm just not quite there. I just can't get past.
Sanctification's a process. So
I know that. But we're talking too much inside baseball. Man. But we wanted
That's
to
the point of this live stream, brother.
Yeah, you're right.
There are no rules. We do whatever we want. And Carlton and Stephen are sitting there very kindly and nicely.
I know. I don't want to bore our
well, they guests, can pitch in and talk, change the subject if they want. So that's up to them. But
we should mention too that we're going to be out in California.
Yeah, I wanted you to go ahead. Yeah,
we'd love to connect with you all. Firstly, at the Westminster Seminary, California annual conference, which truly is a homecoming. Many alums come from Canada, from Korea, from throughout the United States, and gather for Friday and Saturday. This year's conference is on the sufficiency of Scripture, I believe. Please double check that. But we won't have a booth. There are no booths. It's just a good time of fellowship and sitting under teaching from God's Word. Lord willing, we'll be gathering at a local establishment afterwards for some good fellowship and drink with the brethren. And then the next day, we're headed out to Orange County, where we're going to meet up with some dear friends, especially from Grace Church in Laguna Niguel. One of the brothers there has secured a great location for us to have a meetup or a casual gathering will be meeting in Dana Point, California, right near.
It's
I mean,
beautiful.
this is prime real estate, right on the coast, right by Laguna Beach. We're in the Lantern District at a place called Station Craft Brewery and Kitchen, beginning at 5:30 p.m. There is an RSVP online with all the details, but just come if you're in the area. It'd be great to speak of the things of the Lord, enjoy some good food and drink, and get to know one another. And then the next day, if you don't have a place to worship or you're in town traveling, come and hear Camden preach the word at Grace Church in Laguna Niguel. He's going to be opening up a text that's very near and dear to all of us at Reformed Forum, even Colossians 1:28. But he's doing it in context, so you're taking the first few verses.
Yeah, it's proper exegesis. It's not a promo.
Yeah. No, hey, I prefaced it, brother. I
know
was
you
saying
did.
don't
Not
not go to your
busting your
normal
chops.
church. Don't, I'm just saying, if you're in town, you need a place to worship.
It's a great
to worship
place.
together.
Yeah, we were there last year. We had such a great time. They're wonderful brothers and sisters there. We did a little apologetic seminar at the church last year, and it went really well. Really wonderful folks. So if anyone's in the area, of course, as everyone is saying, and we as well, keep praying for all of the people in LA. Thankfully, there are no fires that are right near or in Orange County down there. And but we're keeping an eye on it closely and continue to pray for all the people that are affected. It's a terrible mess, but Lord willing, we'll be able to get there and take some time to fellowship and encourage one another in the Lord. It should be a great time. Do we have anything else or any other? There's some other conferences, maybe real quick. We can do a quick run through of some other stuff. I see we've got on January 30th, Jim, if anyone's going to be in Philippines, I know we got people be surprised, but the number 2 country, number 1 is the US in terms of Reformed Forum downloads and traffic. Yeah. Number 2 country is not Canada. It's not anything in the UK. It's Philippines. Mm-hmm. So, it's crazy. And so keep it up. Our Filipino brothers and sisters, you guys and gals, keep winning the race here. But Jim's going to be at Pilgrim Community Church for a mini conference there, delivering addresses on the theme of the people of God, the doctrine of the church. Then January 31st and February 1st, I'll be in Scottsdale, Arizona at Providence OPC with Jonathan Cruz, our buddy. Everyone loves Jonathan. He and I will be speaking on worship, exploring the biblical foundations of worship. The theme is, what's the specific theme? You can find the info on the website. I don't have it in front of me at the moment, but head on over to Providence OP Church in Scottsdale for info on that. Scott Hatch, one of our authors, is going to be speaking about his book, Van Til and the Foundation of Christian Ethics, on February 15th in Fairfax, Virginia. Great. We love that. That's our best seller of 2024. Mm-hmm. And so if you want to hear the author talk about it, you can head there. And then, of course, our seminar, February 21. Great. Lots of stuff going on. We've been busy, but it's been good and it's been fun. So we're looking forward to the travel. Love seeing people and catching up with them. So, Stephen, we need to get back to Jacksonville. I'm already feeling like it's been too late. We had such a good time last time we were down there.
We had a ton of fun, and being a fly on the wall, as I watched you and one of my best friends, Dr. Scott Cook, nerd out over pizza and Van Til. There were few experiences like it. I kind of wanted to build a tent and just set up right there, and it was a great weekend. It was wonderful.
Remind me of the name of the place where we at. It was amazing.
V's Pizza.
V's Pizza, that's right.
It's the best pizza in Jacksonville.
It was very good.
Well, when you came down for the missionary conference, I was happy to have stolen you away not once but twice. So Camden came over to.
It was a willing abduction.
It was wonderful, and I'm going to ask: have you been able to secure a frame yet? Because you went out like.
No, I'm debating. I was literally. I have it featured in my front my front room. And I haven't had it framed yet because I'm debating on the decor. We're remodeling a part of my my family room, and I'm thinking, how are we going to make this look? So I'm getting out there. I'm going to get it matted and framed. But Stephen was very kind to give me, unless we shouldn't say because you might get arrested. But
I don't. Machen, I'll say this: Machen, not iconography.
Right.
But it's something of OPC relic, and we could
Sure.
talk about that offline. But yeah, I'm actually from a suburb of Baltimore, Pasadena, Maryland. It's equidistant between Baltimore and Annapolis. And I kid you not, when I went to the cemetery, Greenmont Cemetery, where Machen is buried,
Mm-hmm.
I had to go over Erdman Avenue or Parkway.
Yeah.
And it was spelled the same way
Mm.
as that one wily boar, Erdman, that he had to lock horns with in life. So I thought this was, it was just a very nerdy,
So
a
cool.
most Presbyterian journey.
Well,
to
I've
go see Machen's grave.
told several of my OPC friends, Daryl Hart, John Muether, Danny Olinger, about this, and they were not breaking the 10th commandment, but they might have been bordering on it. So,
Stephen, what was there? Lots of debris and just all kinds of random things strewn on the side of Erdman Way.
It was very eclectic. I
Yeah.
think they took tremendous latitude. Just
Yes,
anything
it was a
went.
very wide street.
it was the
wide.
favorite street of all the streets among the general population. It was the most beloved street.
Really?
Gregarious, magnanimous. Everybody loved it.
That's
I
very
will
nice.
say
Do you men have one of these?
Yes.
I figured you would.
I am a card carrier.
Yeah,
Yes.
the special operator PsyOps battalion, Machen's Way.
For the
I was
For the
very
listeners,
privileged to receive this at a more in the PCA event, where I'm sure you were at too, Stephen. But
For the
yeah.
listeners who might not be seeing, Ryan has just held up a
Oh.
"Don't Be an Erdman" business card, a special PsyOps card. So we've got all sorts of Presbyterian goofiness going on. Stephen, you got a mug of some sort. What's that?
Well, I have all sorts of mugs, but this
Yeah.
one is kind of fun because I'm talking to a denominational historian. My wife's grandfather, Westminster Seminary grad. I actually have one of the term papers that he wrote for Dr. Cornelius Van Til. Can't tell. I don't know that he marked. I don't know whether he got high marks on the paper or not. That's not on there. But he was he's a retired PCA minister and gave me this gem. So before, by
Oh, the
faith,
messenger.
it was
Wow.
called the PCA
Oh.
Messenger. And so this bad boy is
Yeah, the 15th anniversary mug.
Yep.
Nice.
Wow. And that's like the font of Supreme,
It is.
the brand.
It's not quite as good as Papyrus, but it'll do.
Just looking at two books on my shelf that are covers are set in papyrus. For anyone
Hey,
who's a
can I-
typography nerd, you can find the not one but two SNL skits about that. If you would.
Okay, since we're on the subject of papyrus, by the way, this is probably the only live stream where that sentence could be uttered. Since we're on the subject of papyrus,
Joe Rogan.
The internet is a
Did you
a
guys-
wide and deep place.
that's what I wanted to say. Did you
Yeah.
guys watch this guy Wesley Huff on Joe Rogan? Sorry,
It's in my queue. I haven't seen it yet, but
Steven,
they were
did you
talking
watch
about
this?
it on Grace and Common.
I watched an hour and a half of it.
Really?
So I'm about halfway through. I watched it with my wife, and I was very pleased when I saw some of the snippets. I'm sure you all did as well, where he critiques the moral exemplar,
Yeah,
argument of Jordan Peterson.
yeah.
I think Wes Huff, he did a very good job. Very humble, very
Yes.
articulate. Right now, you're seeing online because YouTube does YouTube and everybody reacts to everybody's videos. And I think Wes very humbly, he actually said Wesley Huff reacting to Wesley Huff, because some people had heartburn about when he mentioned the
Yeah.
Isaiah scroll in Qumran.
Yeah.
He mentioned that it's word for word, like
Yeah,
the
yeah.
earliest manuscript we have from the Middle Ages.
Yeah, he was being real hard on himself in that
Yeah.
rebuttal video that he did of himself.
Because people on YouTube are insufferable. But he is very humble, and
Yeah.
I think what he meant to say, and I think what is very clear if you talk to anybody who's a scholar in that field, is that it is rather astounding,
Yeah,
and it confounded the wisdom of the age that
nearly identical. I think he said he could have used, but
the Masoretes did a great job. So yeah, I thought it was a very powerful Christian witness.
Yeah.
And I hope there's more to come.
I thought here's my only I totally agree with you. He was very capable, very humble. I went back and watched the video that put him on Joe Rogan's radar with this guy, Billy Carson, who I'd never heard of, a guy who tries to debunk, religion, the Christian faith. And I mean, you watch the first 20 minutes of that one, and it is just, I mean, it's a brutal takedown, because this guy, Billy Carson's way out of his league. And Wesley Huff is like drinking from his mug with a picture of like Codex Sinaiticus on it. And, I mean, he's pulling books right behind him. He's got these handmade manuscripts like P52 that he cut out with an X-Acto knife and replicated himself after visiting, the European museums. And I mean, he was just bringing receipt after receipt, and it was amazing. But here's my one critique. I was listening to see kind of his theological framework for defending the reliability of the scriptures. He says he's a Calvinist, but at every point where I think he could have, where he could have affirmed the worldview and authority of the scriptures, he pivoted to saying, as a historian, the scriptures bear the marks of historical reliability through eyewitness testimony and extra biblical evidence. And at one point, he mentions the story of Jonah and how it does not check the boxes of historical verisimilitude, having the appearance of believability. Now, he didn't say it was for that reason untrue, but it was very clear that according to his criteria for evaluating historical documents, he was oriented toward an inductive sort of bare historical evaluation. And so anyway, I was just interested. I was teaching an intensive apologetics course at RTS when that video came out. And so I came into class, and I had 6 students coming from Toronto. And he runs this Toronto Apologetics Canada entity. And so I asked the students, have you ever heard of Wesley Huff? And they were all like, yeah, Wes Buff. Because the guy, he works out a lot. He's like, if you look at the picture of him on his Toronto Apologetics Canada thing.
Well, maybe he and Rogan hit the gym before or after the
gym.
event.
Yeah, clearly. So anyway, those are my quick thoughts on it. But I've been going on a Wesley Huff binge for the past few days.
I actually stumbled upon him because I was teaching on Wednesday nights at Westminster. We have catechesis for the kids, a meal for everyone, and then we break off into an adult group, and sort of wanted to start off this new quarter with how we got our Bibles, because right now you're seeing a lot of people converting to Roman Catholicism or Eastern Orthodoxy. After all, they claim that's how we got our Bibles. And so I kind of wanted to go back to the basics and say, no, the Bible gave us the church, and God's word is the final and ultimate authority in all matters of faith and godliness. So I used some of Wesley Huff's videos to talk about the reliability of the biblical text. And so when I saw that he was on Rogan, I was very excited. And yeah, like you, Camden, it was interesting. I can't remember if he is the one that said this or if I heard it somewhere different, but he at least seemed to hold with an open hand that Jonah died in the belly of the fish because of the wordplay on Sheol, how he keeps going down. He goes down into the boat and then down into the bottom of the boat and then down into Sheol, right? And I think maybe he was quoting the rabbis who said, oh yeah, this was him. He said that Jesus says, you're not going to get any more signs. You'll get the sign of Jonah. And Jonah died. Right. And so if Jesus is going to give them the sign of Jonah, I was like, I don't agree with that interpretation, because I think you can have, like, for example, depending on how you take this, the provisional fulfillment of, Mahershala Hashbaz in the life of Isaiah. But very clearly, that's not the full extent of the fulfillment that you have in the virgin birth of Christ, that Isaiah was foreshadowing. So I think that Jonah didn't need to die in the belly of the fish in order for
him to be a legitimate sign.
Right, for it to be a legitimate sign or a foreshadowing of the work of Christ. I think Christ died. I don't think that Jonah did, but it was very interesting how he
saying that Jonah died and then was had a Lazarus resuscitation or resurrection?
Which to me, it would have been hard to piece. When did the prayer happen? Pre or post resurrection of Jonah? So it was interesting. I don't want to. I'd be interested to interrogate that.
I'm encouraged that he views it as a historical event, even if because I was just saying, if his primary criteria is as a historian, and he's looking at internal and external evidence as you would any other book, I think we can co-opt a lot of those arguments and say, yeah, the internal evidence of eyewitness testimony is astounding in the Gospels. But if that's what you're banking your trust in the scriptures on, then you're going to have a hard time when those criteria aren't matched by other biblical books.
Well, Stephen, speaking of biblical books, what a really rough segue. But you were talking about what you're preaching lately, and that you're working through Numbers. That's a book that I love, but I wonder how many people out there have preached through Numbers. It's certainly not high on the list of things people might be attacking or presenting, and people in the congregation, people in the pew who might not know much about the book, perhaps might hear that and wonder what in the world is a series on Numbers going to be. But it's one of the most wonderful biblical, theological, redemptive, historical texts, I think. I've always loved the stories of Numbers. But is it true you're actually working through that now? And if so, how'd you end up working through Numbers in your sermons?
Well, like
there
all the
you
cool
go.
kids, I went out and I bought it, and
good man.
All the promotion and all the people gushing over it were absolutely true. I'm persuaded that just the introduction is worth the price of the entire book. It's stellar, and yeah,
he's
Dr.
showing
Morales,
Michael Morales's commentary just for most people are watching this, but just I always got to be the good host and not leave behind our listeners. Sorry, continue.
It reminds me of one elected official who described wearing a certain colored suit and things of that nature. But I'll continue. The book is really exceptional in that. I mean, I'm curious. Maybe before even talking about it, what is the most challenging book that you men have preached? If whether you finished it or preached all the way through, but like I do think that Numbers is probably up there in terms of historical narrative. I think everybody. Hey, you got Jonah, you got Ruth, Genesis, Exodus, like up until, chapter 25. For most people, that's like, oh yeah, let's go for it. But what's the most challenging book, Old Testament book that you all have preached?
I've preached most of the...
I'll answer first, not as a preacher, so you won't expect a more fulsome answer, but my first sermon was out of Jonah, chapter 4. I preached the whole chapter, and I can't subscribe to the idea that Jonah died in the belly of in the fish's belly. It seems, not to go back to the point too much, but I was just reviewing the text, and it says, "Then Jonah prayed unto the Lord his God out of the fish's belly." Then we have his prayer, and then the Lord speaks to the fish, and he's vomited up. So I can't make sense of a death in between that, but. I don't have a hardest book of the Old Testament I preached because
you preached through Habakkuk.
I preached through Habakkuk. Yeah.
Back when you were an intern,
I was under care. Yeah, as an intern. So I exhorted my way through it, and found it quite challenging at points, and had some good sermons, had at least a dud or so in there. But there was one sermon I preached. It was like. I would normally preach about 40 minutes. And this one, it was like 55 minutes. And I had no idea just, how to land the plane or what my point was.
After it was over, he walked out the side door and just left. He didn't even come through the
blackout is a real thing. You know,
Yeah.
like I don't remember getting in the car and going home. Like I come back for evening worship. It's like I preached this morning.
Post-traumatic preaching stress.
Yeah.
Goodness. No, I don't remember that
I've had
sermon,
that.
Ryan.
I've had
So
that.
for better or worse, I preached through most of the minor prophets, and some of those can be tough for a host of reasons, theologically perhaps. But I remember Micah specifically because of its cyclical nature. I found it challenging homiletically, especially I probably had been in the ministry maybe 4 years by then. I found it challenging homiletically to preach it through Lectio Continua in a way that wasn't every third sermon was the same as the one before, because that's kind of the nature of the book of Micah, these cycles of judgment and blessing, and they just keep repeating in many ways. And I wasn't, probably other ways I might approach that text, but I found that perhaps the most challenging homiletically. Theologically or interpretively might be a different answer.
Yeah, I that's a great question, Stephen. I'm currently trying to preach through Proverbs chapter by chapter. And I have a few reasons for trying to do that, trusting in the organization of the text, the grouping of the Proverbs, the way in which the theme of the faithful son or an unfaithful son is basically reoccurs at equidistant points through the book. And so I tried to push back in that method from commentators that say there's just no organization to these Proverbs from chapter 10 on, but taking a chapter and forming it into a homiletical presentation with discernible points that your people can remember, that's faithful to the text and tries to discern a theme. It's been an enormous challenge. What about you?
Well, I preach topically through Proverbs. So I did 1 to 10, and then I picked Proverbs that I thought were either familiar or ones I thought would be profitable for my people. So now I feel weak sauce compared to you.
I
going
question
chapter by
myself
chapter.
every week. But
Probably Ezra and Nehemiah. I think the themes are clear, but the organization, I'm not good with time generally. And so, and this actually happens at the beginning of the book of Numbers, because Numbers 7 to 10 happens, Numbers 7 and 8 actually happens before Numbers 1 to 6. And Dr. Morales does a very good job at explaining why the book is organized that way. And it's good storytelling by Moses. We actually do things like that. So I think Ezra and Nehemiah, you get a lot of genealogies, or you get a list of people. And sometimes working through those lists and feeling like you're not pulling rabbits out of hats. You don't want to do something with the text that you don't feel God included it there for that purpose. So, yeah, but Numbers, I think for most people, the biggest deterrent to the book of Numbers is probably the first 5 chapters or so. And the way we do things here at Westminster, we typically try to alternate. We have a Old Testament book in the morning, then we're going to have a New Testament book in the evening. And if we have a New Testament book in the morning, we're going to have an Old Testament one in the evening. So it's my turn to do an Old Testament book, and everybody does Genesis. My associate minister, he did Exodus, and I don't know that I'm ready to do Leviticus. I feel like I might need a couple more years of prep for that one, but Numbers I thought would be good. And working through those first 10 chapters, I think historically the way that a lot of people look at it is it's just prologue. It's just Israel's preparation to enter the land. And then chapters 11 to 25, you have the sojournings. And then 26 to 36, it's sort of filling out what Israel's life is going to look like in the land. And Dr. Morales's commentary has been so helpful in showing that it's not just like prologue, the chapters 1 to 10, but it's talking about how the camp of Israel is constituted. And so it's heavily invested in ecclesiology and in church leadership. And we all are Presbyterians, so we love 1 Corinthians 14:40, all things being done decently and in order. So I've loved actually, especially chapters 1 through 6. I just preached 7 and 8 this past week, but I'm getting to the Passover and the pillar of cloud and fire. But there's so many gems in Numbers 1 to 8 that I didn't expect to find, and Dr. Morales helped me find them.
That's great.
That's wonderful.
How are your people receiving the word of God and being challenged, comforted, nourished thereby? Are you getting some good feedback and good conversations with the flock?
I have, I think, maybe the best group of hearers that a preacher could ask for. One of the highest. I know it's been a good Lord's Day when I have a row of widows and single women. They all sit on the same row together, and they're some of my most active listeners and encouragers, and they'll say, "You could keep going." I'm about a 40-minute preacher, so that you could have kept going. And yeah, like, so one of the ones I've enjoyed it because part of the challenge with preaching, and the way I look at like Old Testament preaching, is you move from the broad indicatives. You're thrust into you're thrust into an Old Testament narrative, the history of redemption, and it feels very different from the life that 21st century Christians live now. And so you have to do a lot of explanation. You have to explain what their life was like. And then the challenge thereafter is, after having explained it and considered the broad overarching context, then you burrow down into the narrow application, right? Applying that text to your audience. Versus in the New Testament, you go to a Pauline epistle, it starts narrow, right? He says to do a number of things. And then the challenge of preaching is to give them a picture of what life broadly considered will look like if you bring those to bear, right? And how Paul's imperatives fit into the overarching narrative of redemptive history. And so a lot of the time, to you and I, we might think, oh, application, or I have to get to the application. Our folks have really benefited from just hearing the explanation because it feels so remote. So, for example, in Numbers, I think it's 5, the oath of jealousy, explaining how the woman whose husband is jealous or expects that she may have committed adultery, and then the tests for determining whether she did, and you get dust from the tabernacle, and you get water from the laver between the burnt offering, the altar burnt offering, and the tabernacle, and then she drinks it. And if she did in fact commit adultery, her midsection swells, so she becomes infertile. And so, okay, after having explained how this works, the challenge then is, how do you apply this? Or what's the application? And kind of racking my brain about that, the application is, you can hide your sin from men, but you can't hide it from God. Right? And the laver, the water, these holy, these objects that are around the holy God are as witnesses. These testify to the fact that God sees all things. And if Israel's to be a cohesive nation heading into the promised land, well, then they need to strive not just for ceremonial purity, but also moral purity. They need to be holy in their dealings with one another. And so all of that culminates in the great benediction. So God cleanses his people that he might bless his people with the Aaronic benediction in Numbers 6. And Morales brings this out, I think, very beautifully. Number 6 is the culmination of everything that began in Exodus 19. He called them out of Egypt to bless them. He gave them the tabernacle that he might dwell there. He gave them the priesthood that Moses could go in, and through him the people could have fellowship with God so that he could bless them. And so when you look at Numbers 1 to 10 that way, and then the mobility of the camp in 7 to 10 particularly, that God's going to go with Israel, it might be the most fun I've had preaching an Old Testament book up to this point. Oh yeah, I think it might be.
Are you tempted to use the Aaronic benediction every week at the end of the service?
I have. And well, this coming Sunday night, I'm preaching a doubleheader because my associate is in Uganda right now teaching with African Bible University on Reform worship. And I'm going to be preaching Psalm 67.
Oh, nice.
May the Lord bless us and keep us.
Yeah.
And And what's great about Psalm 67 is it turns from "May the Lord bless us and make his face to shine upon us, that your ways may be known to the nations."
There's a
Which
missional. Yeah.
It's Genesis 12. This
Mm.
is the flowering of God's intention for Abraham, that he's going to be a blessing to the nations. And so the psalmist asks for God to bless the covenant people, that they might then go and be a blessing to the world. So just trying to tie it all together, and
Yeah, that's great,
been
man.
a fun season.
That's great. So Psalm 67 is the more ultimate end of number 6.
And Revelation 21 and 22, right? When you get the light of God shining upon his people, and the Lamb is the light of heaven. So it's all pointing to Jesus, and our folks, I think, have really appreciated that these texts have such clear applications. You don't need to shoehorn Jesus in to the book of Numbers. He's so clearly there, just maybe in ways we hadn't pictured before.
That's so great.
That's the best part, preaching a lot of these Old Testament books. But it's wonderful when the lights kind of turn on for people, and they start to see how Christ is revealed in all of Scripture naturally. I mean, as the natural substance, the subject matter of the text on its own terms. It's a beautiful thing. You have any other recommendations maybe for people that might want to approach it, or any other resources you think have been really helpful in guiding you or setting forth the course? There we go.
Carlton Wynne has been very helpful, of course. And I have another book in the EP series. I can't find it right now. So whenever I'm doing prep, you have to think about exegetical commentaries and then also homiletical commentaries, not to steal illustrations or ape someone else's style, but just to kind of see somebody, a seasoned hand. What did they think was significant in this text? Are the same things that I thought are significant? Like,
right?
Do they think these are significant too? And if not, how am I going to demonstrate that this is worth saying? Because I think, like Carlton said in preparation for his lecture, it's equally as important to know what you're not going to say or what you can't say as knowing what you should and will be saying.
For sure. Goodness. We really appreciate that. I'll have to take a look at some of the sermons, but I imagine these are posted somewhere, perhaps. Do you record them, or are they on the Westminster's website at all, or sermon audio or something? Are you afraid to say?
We record them, and we had a couple of weeks where the audio gave out, so we were getting hacked. I don't know.
The Russians.
The Russians have a vested interest in
they don't like numbers
and not seeing the word get out. So,
oh man, well, that's great. Well, we got a few minutes left, just barely, till we don't have to be closing up shop, but we certainly want to respect people's time. And I've got some things to do, and I got a family at home to get to. That I'm not rushing to get home, but I want to talk for a bit, Stephen, about your book, Loving the Law of God in the Life of the Believer. Looking forward to seeing a copy. I see a picture of the cover that Stephen sent on over. It's going to be published by Christian Focus. And we know we've published several books here now, and I've written some with other publishers as well. The process of writing a book takes forever, but then publishing a book maybe takes even longer sometimes. Stephen, where are you at with the process? And maybe you could give people a little preview about this work to come. Certainly we can talk about it when it's actually out. But we do get hate mail if we end up doing a podcast interview about a book somebody can't buy. So we always try to, if people can't buy it right now, we'll preview it, we'll anticipate it, but we'll do a full interview when people can actually buy it. Right, Ryan?
Yes. Yeah, hate mail might be too strong, but yes, some folks do strongly object to that. Yeah.
Yeah, I started writing the book. It was, fall 2023. And I actually turned a couple of sample chapters into Dr. Jonathan Master. I said, hey, do you think there's something here? Because as I sort of looked around and surveyed the field about Christian ethics and particularly the law of God, the 10 Commandments, there was lots of very good books on the 10 Commandments that are written at a popular level, but I could not find a popular level book that focused particularly on the three uses of the moral law. And when I became reformed as a young man, late teens, early 20s, the three uses of the law were huge in speeding up my growth in grace and sanctification, because I'd never heard somebody talk about the law that way before. And because I found the three uses of the law to be so profoundly helpful in my growth in grace, I figured others would find them helpful as well. And so, Carlton, I think I've mentioned this to Camden before, but we've watched we have a Coffee with Calvin men's group that means 6:30 on Tuesday mornings, and we used your video lecture series for a period and benefited from those tremendously. But yeah, the book really developed out of reading John Calvin and his explanation of the three uses of the law. I think it's book 2, chapter 7, and wanting to, I think, push back against what was my default setting, and I think the default setting of so many in the evangelical and Protestant church, is that the law of God is bad. Law bad. And there's the law gospel distinction, which I think is fine as far as it goes. But as we're making that distinction, and I know we'll have friends who really appreciate that distinction, and I do too. But I want to be careful not to distinguish gospel good, law bad.
Yeah.
Like, universally so.
I find that when people are talking law gospel, at least people on the street, when I've met people that use that phrase a lot of times it's just a placeholder for monergism versus synergism. And if that's what you mean by that, like what Calvinist is advocating a form of synergism? I find it's a category error. And then you got other folks that are talking more specifically about how Moses relates to the covenant of grace. And if you subscribe to the Westminster Standards, you have to admit and acknowledge, and you subscribe to the idea that the Mosaic covenant is an administration of the covenant of grace. So law gospel can't be separated in that way of speaking. But I find, defining these terms is really needed and necessary sometimes. And I'm left scratching my head sometimes when I have these conversations.
Me too. And because the gospel, I mean, we're all meant to believe, and we should, like, if the gospel's good and it's being distinguished from it, like, you kind of infer that the law is bad.
Yeah.
Right.
And
there's a few Psalms that kind of argue against that idea.
Psalm 119 is quoted in the introduction, right? Oh, how I love your law. It is my meditation all the day. And it's like, well, that's speaking of all of God's word, not just, I was like, but certainly it's not excluding the 10 commandments, right? It includes them. So I want us to, as in the Reformed tradition, one of the beauties of that I found was that we talk about the law of God, and it not just in its first use, but in its second and third use.
Yeah.
And it was huge for me. So I wrote the book because this is the kind of book that I wish might have been in my hands when I was a young person. I was good on the 5 points of Calvinism, but I didn't know what to do, practically speaking, thereafter. What was my life to look like? If I feel conviction for sin, what do I do thereafter? Is trying hard contrary to the gospel? Because I don't want to be a legalist. And so the book, it anticipates those questions. They're questions that I had and so many others have. And so the way it'll break down is the first chapter, we have to be clear what law we're talking about.
Sure.
So there's 3 types of law, ceremonial, civil, and moral. And then I exposit the 10 commandments, the moral law, in chapter 2. And then the remaining 3 chapters each are dedicated to one of the 3 uses: a mirror, a muzzle, and a map.
Stephen, I love the alliteration there. I'm an alliteration guy, but I don't think I've ever seen the muzzle. I've seen the mirror and the map, but I'm going to use that. Mirror, muzzle, and map. I'm looking at the Amazon page where it has a very extensive description of the book. So it's great.
Yeah, it was funny because I think I originally had mirror, bridle, because that's what Calvin actually says. That's the image he uses in the Institutes, and then map. But then I was conversing with a mutual friend, Jonathan Landry Cruz, and he said, in true Baptist form. I never thought, I'd say that of an OPC minister, but he said, do mirror muzzle map. And then I read, Phil Ryken's commentary on the 10 Commandments, and
Does
he
he use
said mirror
that?
muzzle map.
Oh, nice.
And he got it from a preacher before him. So I think we can trace this all the way back
To Augustine, probably.
Yeah, Paul.
Probably to
I think it's
Augustine.
Paul.
Yep.
My favorite Calvin line on the third use, the map, is that he says that the law is a whip to an idle and bulky ass.
I
don't know if you quote that in the book.
No,
You're gonna get this shut down
From the pulpit. You're gonna get some upset
There's
people.
still time. Yeah.
All the
I
rotund congregants are going to get pretty upset.
I just sent in the final edits, so we've gotten some endorsers, and they've all been profoundly kind. And so I just sent in some of my final edits, and
to their endorsements. Did you pump them up? Did
you get any? I cannot recommend this book more highly.
No. So when it comes out, you'll see what are the endorsements. I kind of gripped my chest just a little bit because it said you need not agree with all of his conclusions.
Oh, you got one of those.
I got one of those. Truman gave me one of those. Yeah.
So it's Jeremy Walker over in the UK, and so he was very gracious to read it, and I'm thankful. And he's Reformed Baptist, so of course there's
so that's
different traditions.
Yeah.
But also just to be nice and spicy, I have two appendices, one of which argues against pedagogical images of Jesus, and then the other argues in favor of Sabbath laws.
Ooh.
But I'm not a Christian nationalist, so I try to.
This is great.
You just sold an extra 1,000 copies there.
You got me on the second commandment. This is great.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's exciting. So did you say May 18th earlier? Well, I'm trying to remember. It's in May though,
May
right?
13th.
13th.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty cool. I'm looking forward to this.
With a Jonathan Master forward.
So he's a stud, and he was very helpful I initially was just going to go into the three uses of the law, and because the book's primarily dedicated to that topic, but he was very helpful in saying you really need to establish why we keep the moral law, but we no longer keep the ceremonial and civil law, which of course touches on all sorts of contemporary discussions about Christian nationhood and do we love God's law or don't we? Right. So wanted to kind of address it is a timely matter. So I wanted to address that. And then also, because it's popular level, I don't want to assume that everybody has had a very robust introduction to what the law actually requires. So Larger Catechism 99 is the key. If you can agree with everything laid out in Larger Catechism 99, sections of rules 1 to 8 for rightly interpreting the 10 Commandments, it opens up the Christian life in a way that you never thought before.
Yeah.
That's amazing. We'll have to have you back, Stephen.
I was just going to say it was a curious remark. We had our what did we call it? Symposium on moral theology. And, Dr. T. David Gordon said, "Well, maybe maybe you'll think I'm strange, but I read devotionally the Westminster Larger Catechism, and that lines up with what you're saying there about
It's great
uses there, which are so rich."
It is.
And in unlocking, discipleship, unto coram Deo living, to go back to how Camden might put it. Carl, I was thinking Carlton, but I was thinking Calvin, because we're talking about John Calvin. Yeah.
Well,
and thanks for mentioning that you've been going through Carlton's course, Stephen, with the men in your church. A lot of times I even fielded a question today from a dear brother in Germany who's been on the program in a different capacity, and he was asking, have any churches used the Sunday school courses or any small groups? And and of course we know a lot have, but there's so many that we don't know about, and we don't hear about it. So it warms my heart, and I always love to hear how folks are receiving the material and growing thereby, or if there's any constructive criticism. We want to hear it all. So thanks for bringing that up.
Two things. One, I want to thank the OPC and the URCNA for the Trinity Psalter hymnal, which we have copies. We use them in our liturgy, including the larger catechism was huge. That it was omitted from the Red Trinity hymnal is one of the greatest mistakes, that we probably ever made in the American Reformed tradition. But including it in the Psalter hymnal, kudos to you all. But then also, Ryan, my only, Camden and Carl, it's good that both of you are here. My only complaint on the video series is that Carlton wasn't wearing a key lime, wide-collared, psychedelic garb like what you saw R.C. Sproul in like the 80s, like looking at your videos.
With the big hair.
You have, as the
polyester suit.
You have aura, Carlton, but not like that much. You know what I mean?
Well, brother, it's the logic of the Geneva gown. We want the word to shine. We want Calvin to shine, not the man. But man, thank you. Yeah, let me just reaffirm gratitude for you guys using that. And I'm really looking forward to this book. I'm so glad you wrote it, and we'll look forward to it when it comes out in May.
Absolutely. We'll have to have you back when it's out. Have a copy sent over. We'll put in with Christian Focus, and we'll queue that up in the list of future episodes. And we'll certainly have you come back again for people. That's coming out May 13th, 2025. And also take a look at Carlton's course on Calvin's Institutes, books 1 and 2, available for free at reformedforum.org. The videos are there. We have a podcast episode or version. We have a podcast version, audio version available as well that you can download, I believe, and all that stuff is keyed up and ready. It's been fun. So yes, blew by real fast. We're at 4:13 Central, so longer than I thought we might go, and we could keep going, but I think it's good to wrap things up. Carlton, Stephen, Ryan, thanks for joining us. It's been a real pleasure, and thanks to Pat as well, who was on earlier. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, it's been fun, guys.
Fun.
We'll keep it up. That's 3 weeks in a row. We'll see if we're free. We might be. Well, we'll be in California next Friday. So we'll work out either a different time, or we'll catch up with everyone a different day of the week. We'll let everyone know, but stay tuned and find out information about all of our events, publications, episodes, courses, all that stuff. reformedforum.org. You'll find information about everything there. Subscribe to the email newsletter. It's a great way to stay up to date. And if you don't mind, is it obligatory if you're doing YouTube stuff? I got to say, smash that like button. I need to say hit the bell.
Outdated.
Carlton
all that
knows.
Stuff.
He's got the teenagers.
My kids, they don't know what or necessarily care. They're good kids, but they don't know necessarily what I do. Who does? It's so strange. But when they describe what I do to their friends, they say, "Oh, he's on YouTube." That's how they describe my job.
He's a YouTuber.
I don't know what I do.
Not an evangelist. He doesn't preach and teach the gospel. He's on YouTube.
He's a YouTube Reformed influencer.
Exactly.
That's
exactly.
So funny. Well,
such is my lot in life. I'm happy to occupy that lot for as long as the Lord would have us. And if this is beneficial to everyone, let us know. We thank you for everybody who's been in the live chat and everybody watching live. And for everyone watching after the fact, we would like to hear what you have to think. If you like this, let us know. We'll keep doing it. Ryan and I were talking, maybe even next time we'll start having some live giveaways, and we can have some other segments as well, and get some more guests on. So we really appreciate it. But it has been good talking to everybody, and we'll catch you next time. Next time we're live on YouTube. Thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you later. There we go. I think we're off. Carlton's really off.